Hello, this is We Talk Football. Welcome back. Thank you for being with us again. Today is a very I don't want to say it's a big video, but it's something that I've been working on, that I've been thinking about for a little while now. Something that I'm really, really excited about. Um, I've put a lot of work and research and learning and a lot of football and a lot of thinking into this, a lot of writing, a lot of searching. Um, and today's video is something that I'm really, really excited about. Today, I want to talk about the 10, the 10 greatest national teams of all time. Now, I'm doing this because it's the international break, so there's no club football. Certainly in Europe, in South Africa, in Africa, there's no there's no club football. So I thought this would be the best time to have a video about the 10 greatest teams that I think that we've seen. 10 greatest teams that I think have played the game of football. I have a few categories that I based this on. um, so this would be team achievements, so trophies. What do the teams win? The achievements of the team. I looked at the players, I looked at the managers, I looked at also the style of play. The style of play is very key in this. How good were you when you were playing? Were you just a team that won with no real substance? Because I think that's quite key, because that can tell you whether a team can continue to win or not. Does the way you play, does it live on in memories of football fans around the world, so those are the categories that I looked at. I also looked at some of the other things, key stats like goals and goals goals conceded, wins and losses, very interesting records as well, like how was your record over a period of time, how many wins did you accumulate, how many losses, all those things. So yeah, when I say I put in a lot of effort researching, that's what I mean. But I'm very excited for this one. Please remember to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at We Talk Football. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at We Talk Football 24, and also follow us on Facebook at We Talk Football. But yeah, let's get into our video and let's see who's making it into our top 10 greatest teams of all time. At number 10, I've got Hungary. So I know this is a little bit of a spanner in the works. Very early on, at number 10, the first team that I've got as the greatest national team of all time, from 1950 to 1958. Very long ago, very, very long. My mom wasn't born, my parents were not born at that time, I wasn't born, but from what I've seen, from what I've read, from what I've researched, from what people say, Hungary were an excellent, excellent team, and I'll tell you why. They played a phenomenal brand of football. That's first. I think, from what I've seen, they were the first team to kind of implement and kind of really do really great with a total football system where players interchange, players free flow, move into different positions, skillful players play in the system, play in the team, and they interchange. From, you'll have, one player playing as a left wing player in one moment, and the next moment he's up front scoring a goal. Or you'll have your wing back now flying forward, in the wing position, creating goals or scoring goals. And I think there's quite a few things that I looked at and why I had Hungary at number 10. Now, they did not win. They did not win a Euro tournament. They did not win a World Cup, but they did win the 1952 Olympic gold. En route, they beat Yugoslavia and they beat the Soviet Union. So they beat Yugoslavia. I think they beat Yugoslavia 7-1. And in the final, they beat the Soviet Union 6-0. And those are some of the memorable matches that people talk about. Another two other big games that they played were against England. And the first game they played England at Wembley. Now, at the time, England were the first best team in the world, ranked number 1, and Hungary were ranked number 3. But Hungary went to Wembley, the old Wembley, and beat England 6-3. A proper lesson in football, really, because I think at that time, England had that whole aura and mantra saying that they invented the game of football, they know all about it. But Hungary went in there, taught them how to play football, and they played a beautiful brand of football, flowing goals, and very, very exciting with great players as well. And then, after that loss, England wanted revenge. Went to Budapest to play Hungary again. I think 2 or 3 weeks later, and they got spanked. Even worse than the first game, 7-1, which is a great humbling for England. And I think from then on, like, Hungary cemented their place as a great in the game, a great team. Now, this is something very interesting, and this is why I placed them in the top 10. Hungary from 1970. Hungary from 1950 to 1958. They played 51 games. Won 43, drew 7, and lost 1. You can only guess which one game they lost. It was in the 1954 World Cup final against Uruguay. They lost, and of all the games that they could have lost, seriously, of all the games that they could have lost, they lost the World Cup final, which is amazing. It's staggering, really, because it's one of the most cruel things that has ever happened in football. I think it was the 1954 or 1956 World Cup final. Sorry, might get my signals crossed. But yeah, can you imagine? You play 50 games, you don't lose one, you play an exciting brand of football, you beat teams 6-3, 7-1, 6-0, and the one game you lose in 8 years, the one game you lose in 50 matches is the World Cup final. That is one of the most cruel things that I've ever heard of or witnessed in my lifetime in sports. And after that, they were never the same, really, because it was around the time of World War II. The country was broken up. Well, not also some players were a little bit old, but they had some fantastic players that you have to talk about. Ferenc Puskas, there's an award for him for best goal of the season every season, and his name still lives on because he was that good. He scored 86 goals in 83 matches for Hungary, and that's why I think I've put Hungary at number 10 as the 10th greatest national football team of all time. At number 9, another team, another real throwback, not as far back as Hungary at number 10, but at number 9, I've put West Germany from 1972 to 1974. Now, this team, if you look at the trophies that they've won, you could place them higher, absolutely. But if you take a closer look at how they won those trophies and what they did and how they played, that's why they're number 9. Very close to being number 10, actually, but because they won a little more than Hungary, I have to put them at number 9. In 2 years, they won the Euro Championship in 1972, and they won the World Cup in 1974. They did not do much because if you take a look at the 1972 Euro Championship, there were qualifiers before, but in the actual tournament, there were basically 2 games. There were it was the semi-final and the final. It was very confusing for me when I was searching for this. I was so confused. I couldn't find the group games. I couldn't find what happened in the qualifiers for Germany, for or West Germany rather. And I only found two matches in the actual Euro tournament. And Germany won two games in the Euro Championship of 1972. They won two games, scored 5 goals, conceded one. Not too bad. Okay, fine. And they won the World Cup in 1974, which was a little more impressive because they had more games to play. And I think they played better teams in the 1974 final, in the 1974 World Cup, especially in the final game because they had to play Johan Cruyff's immense Dutch side, because they had players like Rudolf Kroll. They had obviously Johan Cruyff, but with the emergence and the greatness of that Dutch team, if they had won the World Cup, seriously, I would have had them in the World Cup in the top 10. If the Netherlands, if the Dutch team of 1974 had won that 1974 World Cup, if they had won that World Cup, I would have had them in the top 10 over this West Germany team. But simply because they did not, West Germany had players like Gerd Müller and Franz Beckenbauer. They just stifled. They just stifled the Netherlands. They didn't play a pretty game. They didn't really play an attractive brand of football. West Germany, they played as efficient as any German team has ever played, as efficient as any football team has ever played. They just went out there, they won the game, and they came back with the trophy. Gerd Müller was their top goal scorer with 4 goals. It's hard to pick between Gerd Müller and Franz Beckenbauer to say who was the best player in the team. I personally went with Franz Beckenbauer because he had better technical ability. Not to take anything away from Gerd Müller, he was a sensational goal scorer. He was a lion. He was a beast scoring goals. He hunted goals down and he scored goals, which was great for Germany. They didn't want to play pretty football. They didn't need a pretty striker, someone who's going to be skillful and whatnot. They just needed Gerd Müller, and he did the job. He did the business. And I think one of the things that impressed me in the World Cup, in the 74 World Cup for West Germany, was Franz Beckenbauer playing with a hurt shoulder, and he soldiered on. He played, and he gave us one of the greatest performances that we've ever seen in terms of like considering the stage. It's a World Cup. It's a knockout game. And he played with a hurt shoulder. He won the game and won the World Cup. So for me, at number 9, West Germany, they could be higher, but because of the way they played, can't have them above the other teams that I'll have and the other teams that you'll see. So West Germany 1972 to 1974. At number 8 is a team that probably a lot of you will be familiar with. I think a lot of my contemporaries, people around my age. It's a modern team. France, 2018. I've put them at number 8 because I think they were really, really good. Maybe a little bit underrated because I think also because they are a team that are still very fresh in our memories. They are a team who still have players, doing their thing right now in the French team, who are still being called up to the French squad. Maybe they get underrated and overlooked, but they were fantastic. I think the way they won the World Cup, they were so dominant. They played really well, and also the players that they had. It's hard to have a team of individual stars, but get them playing into a system that's going to be a winning system, a system that everyone buys into collectively. And I think that's what you saw with the France team of 2018. You had some fantastic players, as I said. Kylian Mbappe, N'Golo Kante, Paul Pogba, Griezmann, Giroud. You had a very good defensive team with Lucas Hernandez, Benjamin Pavard, Varane, and I mean, of course, Samuel Umtiti isn't like an all-time great defender, but I think in the tournament he was fantastic. He scored the goal against Belgium in the semi-final that won France, and put them through to the final where they faced Croatia, and I think they were awesome in terms of just like as a team. I don't think I don't think any one player was so far above everybody else where you say that is the MVP for France. Everyone played well, almost in the same level. And I think as a team, they really did amazing stuff. They scored 14 goals in the tournament and conceded six goals, 5 wins, 1 draw. They were fantastic. And I think in this game, right, even though they conceded 3 goals to Argentina, but the way they won the game, I don't think it was as close as the scoreline says. I think France were fantastic in that game. They pressed, they defended well as a team, they nullified the threat of Lionel Messi, the greatest player of all time. And I think they had a bunch of players that bought into a system, into a mindset of we have to win and this is how we're going to play. They didn't play pretty football, it was effective. They hurt teams because they had players with creativity and guile like Griezmann and Paul Pogba, but they also had the threat of Kylian Mbappe with his pace and goal scoring ability, his youthfulness, and I think they played really well. They had the experience of players like Raphael Varane and Olivier Giroud. Certainly not the greatest stars, but when they fit into the system, they played well. They did well to fit into the system and do what needed to be done to win the tournament. And for me, they're the eighth best team of all time. And they had a coach that won a World Cup, Didier Deschamps. And there are a lot of similarities to that 2018 France team and the France team that won the 2018 World Cup. So I guess it was like, a Bluetooth sending or a Bluetooth transfer of, tactics mentality from 98 to 2018, which worked well for France. Number 8, France, 2018. At number 7, we have Germany, 2014. Another really recent team. I think a lot of us watched the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, where Germany just went there, took everybody's lunch money, walked into the Brazilian imaginary house, put their feet up, wore the Brazilian robe, told Brazil to make them a sandwich, get me a beer, bring it here so I can drink it right in front of you. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna sit in your chair, Brazil. That's what Germany did in 2014. They played really well. I think what we saw in 2014 from Germany was something that we glimpsed at a little bit in 2010 when they scored 13 goals in the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. They were an exciting team to watch. They absolutely battered teams. They battered England 4-1. They thrashed Argentina in the quarterfinals. Well, England was in the last 16, 4-1. Argentina was in the last 8, 4-0. And they were so exciting. They played a great brand of football. I know this is something that's not really, connected to German football. But in 2010, they were so amazing. They played, you could say they played on the counter, but it was a fantastic counter-attacking team where they knew what they needed to do. They had creative players like Mesut Ozil, young players Thomas Muller, who was in the 2010 squad because Michael Ballack couldn't go because of injury, right? And then you saw the maturity of those players in the 2014 World Cup, where you mix that with players like Tony Cruz and Bastian Schweinsteiger. You mix that with the experience of um, Miroslav Klose, and that's what you get. Like you get a very dominant German team, a very efficient German team. In 2010, they were very exciting, free flowing, counter attacking, speed, highway robbery. But in 2010, you saw a very creative team, lots of goals still, but also solid, mature, knew when to close up the game, knew when to score goals, knew when to kill opponents off, and they played a beautiful, a great, efficient, direct kind of football, not possession based, not the most beautiful, but direct, great to watch still, scored goals. They scored 18 goals. The most goals in a World Cup tournament by a team was 19 in 1970 by Brazil. They were second. They scored 18 goals and conceded 5. They won 6 and drew 1-2 against Ghana. What a game. If you have a chance, watch 2014 Germany versus Ghana. Amazing game of football. And as I said earlier, they had players like Bastian Schweinsteiger, Tony Cruz, Thomas Muller, Mesut Ozil. And in the final, Mario Götze scored against Argentina. And, I could have had them higher, but if only they won more tournaments, if they won more trophies. I think also I could say the same thing about the French team of 2018. Um, I, I was fighting with myself to say which team was better. I fought with a lot of teams actually, but this was one of the teams that I fought with the most. The 2014 Germany or the 2018 France team. The French team scored 14 goals and conceded 6. So I had to go with the Germany team. They scored 18 goals and conceded just 6 goals, 5 goals. And the famous game, they scored 7 against Brazil. As I said earlier on, they went into the Brazilian house, kicked their feet up, walked in with muddy shoes, told Brazil to get them a sandwich and a beer, sat at the table, sat where Brazil usually sits. Can you imagine someone coming to your house and sitting on and you're in your chair? That's what Germany did. They took their lunch money and they made absolute whipping boys of Brazil in Brazil. So at number 7, 2014 Germany. Number 6, I've put Brazil 1958 to 1962. Another very, very old team. Of course, I never got to watch them. I only got to watch the highlights. I've watched some of the games. I've researched, did my, collecting data. And I think they were a really good team with some brilliant players. And something that was interesting about that Brazil team was right after the Hungary dynasty from 1950 to 1958 followed the Brazil team of 1958 to 1962. Of course, they had Pele and Garrincha. Especially, I mean, the most popular player there was probably Pele, because he was just that popular, right? And for a long time, even when I grew up knowing that Pele was the greatest player of all time. And people used to tell me that. I remember talking to my cousin and he said something crazy that I think about now and I'm like, impossible. He said Pele used to score every minute of every game. That's insane. So that's how big Pele was. That's how awesome he was. And of course, the 1958 World Cup will be very, very, ingrained in our minds because that was the first time the world got to see Pele as a 17-year-old teenager making his debut for Brazil, a huge team who had lost the last World Cup to Uruguay. And Pele always tells the story, and he says he saw his dad crying, he was in tears, sad, you know, and he told his dad, he promised his dad, I will bring the World Cup to Brazil one day. He did. He brought three, and for a long time he was known as the greatest player of all time. I don't know now, of course, there have been many players to come, but that Brazil team were fantastic in so let's look at the 1958 World Cup. They won 5 games, drew 1. They scored 16 goals and only conceded 4. Their top scorer was Pele with 6 goals in that tournament. He was fantastic. As a 17-year-old, to score 6 goals in your first tournament for Brazil, the Seleção, the greatest national team, the greatest nation of all time in terms of football. And you come in there, 17-year-old. Well, I guess Brazil are the greatest national team of all time, hugely, largely because of him. So, right? And you had players like Garrincha, Mario Zagallo, who went on to become the coach for Brazil, coached them to the 1970 World Cup win and the 1998 World Cup where they reached the final with Luis Ronaldo. Fantastic. So he's an absolute legend. And they went on to win back-to-back tournaments. Now, the thing about the second World Cup was, of course, Pele has a medal for the 1962 World Cup, but he only played 1 game. And not even 1 game, he played less than half the game, and he was injured the rest of the tournament. And I say this not to slight Pele, but to say how great Brazil was, because if you lose any team, if you think of any great team losing their best player, 1986 Argentina losing Maradona, 2020s Argentina losing Messi, France losing Mbappe or Zidane or whatever the case could be, they're not going to win those tournaments. But Brazil lost Pele, their best player. Now you could argue and say, because they lost their best player and still won the World Cup, was Pele the best player? Wasn't it Garrincha? And a lot of people, even in Brazil, say Garrincha was slightly better than Pele, and those times he was more important to Brazil than Pele. And watching him play, he was exciting, man. He was a throwback winger. He could, skin you, break your ankles, and had a great final product, whether it be a cross or scoring a goal, finishing. Garrincha was the boy. He was absolutely fantastic. Cross-legged, one foot longer than the other, or one leg longer than the other. He was awesome. And for me, because they won back-to-back tournaments, and that's the thing. That's one other thing that I put against the Germany 2014 team and Germany 2014, France 2018. Those teams, they should have won more because they were that good. They had the players, they had the dominance, they had the power, the greatness to win more tournaments. They did not. They could have been higher. This team is higher because they played a beautiful brand of football as well. And they had some awesome players as well playing for them. So at number 6, Brazil 1958 to 1962. Number 5, this is a team that's going to sound quite familiar. Think about a team with a star player who the team plays a system of a very strong defense, but with fluid, creative players up front that could do anything at any moment. A team that had a striker that didn't really score a lot of goals, but was key as key as any player in the team, created chances, made space for the creative players to come through, make passes or score goals. Great defenders, teams that could defend any kind of score and win the game. The team or a team that won the World Cup against and en route they beat an all-time great player. I'm talking about the 1998 to 2000 France team. They sound very familiar. Also, one thing that I forgot to mention, they had one person who's a common denominator in both teams, Didier Deschamps, as a captain in those 98 in the teams from 98 to 2000, and was the head coach for the 2018 French team. Fantastic team. What can I say? I think they were brilliant. They were. One thing that I will say about them is they made it very difficult for you to beat them because they had amazing defenders. Marseille Desailly, Laurent Blanc. They had Lilian Thuram. I think Lilian Thuram is a top 10 fullback of all time. I've placed him in my top 10 fullbacks of all time. They had Didier Deschamps as well, as I've spoken about, very defensive-minded player, and now as a coach, I think maybe to his detriment as a coach. But then also with that defensive solidity and strength, they had players like Zinedine Zidane and Yuri Jokaev, who were as creative and as skillful midfield as you'll ever see play. Really, they were awesome. They were fantastic for France. It's just exactly what France needed. It's like they were like roses growing from concrete. Concrete being the defensive solidity that France had, and they were the beautiful roses, making it all come together, right? And they had players, as I mentioned, Zidane, Jokaev, Deschamps. They had a young Thierry Henry. They had a young Patrick Vieira. They had a very mature and strong Emmanuel Petit, who played in all those games. They had David Trezeguet. They had Robert Perez. They had a squad. They were the boys, man. And I think they maximized their potential to win trophies. Not many teams could say they won 2 trophies. Not many teams could say in their golden generation they fully took advantage of their golden generation, as France did, winning the World Cup in '98 and the Euros, beating Italy in the Euros in 2000. And in the World Cup, they won 7 games, drew 1, lost 0, scored 15 goals, conceded only two goals. Awesome. Awesomeness. Their best player, obviously, was Zidane. In the Euros, they won 5 games, drew 0, lost 1. They lost 1, but they scored 13 goals, conceded 7. What can I say? They were a fantastic, strong defensive team. And there were a lot of similarities between the 2018 France team and the 1998 France team, because you had skillful, creative players like Griezmann and Mbappe in the 2018, and in the 98 you had Jokaev and Zidane, and then you had a striker, did not score too many goals but did the job for the team. Protected the ball, laid it off in Stéphane Grevache in 98, and you had Olivier Giroud in 2018 doing a very similar job. Grevache didn't score any goal in the 2018 World Cup, and the 1998 World Cup, sorry. It's always similar to Giroud, scored 1 goal, but they were key to their teams. Then you had the defensive solidity of, in 2018, Raphael Varane, Benjamin Pavard, Lucas Hernandez. In 98, same thing. You had strong players. In midfield for France, 2018, Kante. 98, you had Deschamps. In defense in the 98 France team, you had Marcel Desailly, Laurent Blanc, Lilian Thuram, Vicente Lizarazu. So you had a bunch of really good players. very similar, right? Very similar styles, very similar players. And for me, the fifth best team of all time, France 1998 to 2000. Now we're in the top four, top five. Well, now we're at number four, fourth place. Brazil 2002 to 2004. Now, with this team, if you wanted to, you could include their time beginning from 1998, or you could even begin from 1994, because some of the players that played from 1994 in the World Cup, which they won, like Ronaldo. Ronaldo was in the World Cup squad, even though he did not play, but he was there in the 1994 World Cup winning Brazil team that went on to reach the final in 1998. That went on to win the 2002 World Cup and win the Copa America in 2004. That was a great run. Amazing run for Brazil. Fantastic, because you don't reach all those finals and win all those trophies and you're not an amazing dynasty of a team. Brazil were always going to be heavily featured in the top 10 because they've won 5 World Cups. They are still regarded as the greatest footballing nation in the world, and of all time, probably because of the stars that they've given us. Just based on the stars. Also, Brazil, right? Of course tactics are important, but in Brazil the stars are key. They're very, very important. And when you talk about star players, key players, skillful players, you have to talk about players like in that era from 2002 to 2004. Of course, you have to start with the phenomenon Ronaldo. He's probably the most talented footballer of all time, and he played and he won. You could say he won 2 World Cups. I don't really count the 94 World Cup, but the 2002 World Cup was his. He scored 8 goals. He dominated. He was the player of the tournament. He won the Ballon d'Or off the back of that World Cup tournament. And for me, Brazil 2002 was sensational. The kind of football that they played. I spoke about Germany earlier on in 2010, the exciting kind of football, but they made it all work out and won at the same time, right? Amazing, typical Brazilian samba football, exciting on the eye, creative passes, no look passes, sambas, breaking ankles, skinning people, putting people on skates, dancing on the ball. That's what they did. They literally did the samba on the ball while they played, and they smiled and killed you at the same time. How do you live with that, right? And for me, they were fantastic in the World Cup. In the 2002 World Cup, they won all their games. The only other side to win all their games in the World Cup was the 1970 Brazil team. So it's a Brazilian thing, right? And that's why they are regarded as the greatest country in terms of football. So as I was talking, 2002 World Cup, they won 7 games, drew 0, lost 0, scored 18 goals. Again, the record set by the 1970 Brazil team, scoring 19 goals. This one scoring 18 goals, conceding 4 goals. Their top scorer was Ronaldo with 8, and their best player was Ronaldo. And they were simply fantastic, right? They won the Copa America in 2004. Slightly a little less impressive, but still very, very good, man. Like winning 2 tournaments in a row. That's like, you can't wish for more. They won 3 games in that tournament, drew 2, lost 1. And they had also another emerging star in Adriano, who scored 7 goals, and that was the tournament MVP as well. Fantastic players like Ronaldo, I've mentioned, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, Adriano, Gilberto Silva. For me, you have to have Ronaldo, the phenomenon, and Ronaldinho in your top 10 footballers of all time. I certainly do. I do. And that's one of the reasons. You see the talent, especially offensively, that they had, and they keep churning out. After that generation, you had players like Robinho, exciting players, even though they didn't win much after that. But in that golden generation that they had, but from 1998, 2002, 2004, they were breathtaking. Everybody wanted to watch them. They were like the Globetrotters, right? Whenever Brazil were playing, I remember growing up. Whenever Brazil were playing, you had to watch them. You had to see them play. And for me, the fourth greatest team of all time, Brazil, 2002 to 2004. Now, the third best team of all time is a team that's still active, a team that might win more tournaments. You know, now I don't know if winning more tournaments for them would necessarily, push them higher in the rankings. Argentina, 2021 to 2024, currently. Or I don't even know whether I should say 2021 to 2024 because they're still very, very good. They've just won the Copa America. They look good for the World Cup in 2026. I think they'll definitely be there, of course. And now I don't know if Messi and, of course, we've seen now recently Di Maria retire from international football. I don't know if we'll see Messi follow suit. But this, for me, this the third greatest national team of all time simply because they won. They don't play a particularly great brand of football, right? I don't think they play a bad kind of football, but they don't play a beautiful kind of football where you like they have to be number one because they won 3 trophies. They don't have the greatest players of all time. And if you had to pit them against all the other teams in the top 10 that I've mentioned, they probably are at the bottom in terms of players, in terms of like squad depth and quality. But the way they play as a unit in terms of togetherness as a team that plays together. As a team, they are right up there in terms of how they play as a team. They play together. And, there's a lot of things that could point to that. Of course, they've won 3 tournaments, but also, check this out. They've played 63 games, won 45 of those, drawn 3 and only lost, drawn 14 and only lost 3. That's staggering. Since the introduction of Lionel Scolani in the team as the manager, they've looked a different team. They've looked more together. They've looked better. And that's why they've won so many tournaments. That's why they've played so many games. 63 games in 3 years for national team is a lot of games, man. And so let's look at the Copa America in 2021. They won 4, drew 2, lost 0, scored 9 and conceded only 2. They're a very hard team to beat. I will say they don't have the greatest defenders of all time. As I said, they don't have the greatest players of all time in any position, really. But they definitely have a mentality of togetherness where they make it really hard for you to beat them. You might have better players than them, you might play better than them, but you will find it very difficult to beat them. And of course, the one player that they have all time great, Lionel Messi. They have the greatest player of all time, really. And in that tournament, he was the top goal scorer with 4 goals, and he was the MVP, and he provided the most assists in that tournament. In the 2022 World Cup, Messi scored 7 goals with 3 assists. He was the tournament MVP, his second World Cup MVP. And then in the Copa America that just recently ended, they won 5 games, drew 1, lost 0, scored 9 goals, 1 conceded. Lautaro Martinez was the best player. He proved me wrong, and he proved a lot of his doubters wrong for being, a lot of people were comparing him to Gonzalo Higuain, saying that he's a little similar to Higuain in terms of, in big moments, he doesn't come up. But he did in this tournament, scoring 5 goals and the winning goal in the final against Colombia. Absolutely amazing for Argentina. They are living it up right now as one of the greatest footballing nations of all time as well. And as I said, a huge reliance on Lionel Messi, but also like what I want to go back to is like the brand of football. Like people will say they play boring football. I don't know. Like it can be boring. It can be very very defensive. It can be very very tough to beat. But also look at the World Cup. Watch the World Cup final in 2022. They were playing amazing football, man. They were silky. They were moving. They were fast. They played with urgency. They hurt France. And they scored goals. They were exciting to watch. It was a beautiful game, probably the greatest game of all time as well. Maybe that's why they are in the tournament. Not the reason, but one of the reasons, of course, is the games they played, memorable games. 2022 World Cup final, 3-3 winning on penalties, amazing, a dream. I didn't think I'd see the day little Messi would win a World Cup. Luckily, in my time, I saw the greatest player of all time reach the mountaintop, peak, and be the GOAT. So, yeah, Argentina 2021 to 2024, or even moving forward. Coming in at second place, Brazil. 1970. I had to fight myself with this one as well. It was very tough to put them in second place. Not because they didn't deserve there, but it was hard because I could have easily said they were the greatest national team that we've ever seen, right? And if anyone says they are the greatest, if anyone says they're number one, I am not going to argue with them. I'll agree. I'll say, yeah, from what I've seen, from what I saw, and from the documentaries that I've watched, and I might, so I'll try. So I've watched a lot of, as I said, I watched a lot of games, documentaries. I watched the World Cup final in 1970 between Brazil and Italy. So I might put some of those, links in down below in the description for people to link and see, because I've had people say, my friends say that, how do you know these things? It was so long ago. But when you have the internet, the beauty of that is that you can go back and watch some of these games, watch the highlights, research, find out things. So from what I've seen, the Brazil team were so good. I really wish I was alive when they did their thing, man. Oh, I think you absolutely could argue that they played the most beautiful brand of football ever, even better than any Brazilian of course I think better than any Brazilian team, absolutely better than any Spanish team, better than any other team that's played football. The 1970 team played the most beautiful brand of football. Offensive, silky, creative. They did things where you're like, I've never seen that before. Like Pele dummying the goalkeeper in a group game and missing by inches. He dummied a through ball was played to him. He dummied the goalkeeper who was trying to approach and cut off the pass. Dummied the goalkeeper, goes around the goalkeeper and misses by a few inches. Really, really close. Or him, Pele again, trying a half-field shot, missing by inches. But also some of the other things that they did, playing, passing. And that World Cup was quite inspired by Brazil, because in 1966, they were knocked out by England, who played a very physical game. You know, they knew that Pele was their star player and they liked to play beautiful football, but not very physical. England came in, hit them hard, played them off the park, kicked them. And in 1970, Mario Zagallo, who was then a two-time World Cup winner, now the Brazilian national team coach, said, "We're going to go to Mexico early, high altitude in the heat, and we're going to train to be physical and to last and endure. Because if we meet a team like England again, we have to be ready, not just to play our game, but to be able to withstand what they bring physically. And we have to be more stronger than them. We have to have greater stamina than them. We have to endure more than they will endure." And I think that was justified because in the tournament, Brazil beat England 1-0 in the group stages. And I think mentally for Brazil, it took them to a level where they were like, this is the team that beat us in the previous tournament. We got them and we beat them handily. It was a 1-0 win for Brazil, but if you watch the game, it was not close. England were not close. They couldn't get close to how Brazil were playing, how they were moving the ball, how they themselves were moving to create spaces for themselves, right? And they had so many creative players out there, not just Pele. They had players like Rivellino, Tostao. They had Jairzinho playing, and they did their thing. It was amazing to watch. Um, Jairzinho scoring 9 goals. Brazil as a team scoring 19 goals in that tournament. Outstanding, 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 brilliant. And they were that good. The only reason they're second is because I think that was the peak, right? And before or after the 1970 World Cup, they didn't win anything, right? And for me, they could have won more if you had those players at younger stages in their careers. Like Pele, if he was younger, they probably could have went on and won either the 1978 World Cup or maybe the one before in England. But they were so amazing. One thing that I will say is, if in a vacuum, right, there's a world where you take the 1970 World Cup Brazil winning team and you play them against any team in history and they beat them. Like, I think they could beat Argentina, absolutely. They could beat any of the Spanish teams. They could beat any team that came forth. They were that good. They played that brilliantly, that beautiful kind of football. And so for me, Brazil 1970, second greatest national team. At number one, you have Spain. Spain. I just have to say Spain, and you know which Spain I'm talking about. You know which, like, if I say the greatest team or club team of all time is Barcelona, you know which Barcelona I'm talking about, right? So same goes for these guys. They were that awesome. They were that good. Spain from 2008 to 2012, amazing. The greatest team I ever saw. The greatest team that I think has ever laced up, stepped on a pitch and played football, because they won 3 tournaments in a row. And unlike Argentina, Argentina, as I've said, right, 2021 to 24 to now, they've won 3 tournaments. But there were times where I was like, they definitely don't play a really good brand of football, Argentina. But Spain, throughout, they had such an identity. They played excellent football, dominant football. And like with beautiful football, it's often said they just play like teams that play beautiful football. It's just beautiful. But Spain also played beautiful, dominant football. Winning the Euros in 2008. They won 5 games, drew 1-0 losses. That's in 6 games. They scored 12 goals. They only conceded 3. David Villa. David Villa was their top scorer with 4 goals. Xavi Hernandez was their MVP, their best player. And then in the World Cup in 2010, won 6, drew 0, lost 1 to Switzerland. I remember that game. They scored 8 goals and scored only 2 and conceded only 2. Now, if you go into a tournament, I think I'm not sure, but of course, like um the other teams. But if I'm not sure, I think Spain scoring 8 goals is the lowest total number of goals a World Cup winning team has ever scored. But if you watch the games, they were that good. Like they were they were as good as any 4-0 winning team. Like if like they could have won 4-0. They could have won 3-0. But they just couldn't score enough goals. They scored 8 goals. Well, they scored enough goals, but I can't say they scored enough goals to say that was like for many people feel like that was not a good World Cup. For me, it was. Watch the games. Like I've recently been watching old games. I watched the Spain Germany game where Carlos Puyol scored the winner. I know it was 1-0, but watch that game. Spain were just 2 levels better than Germany. And as I said earlier, Germany in that tournament was so good. They battered England 4. They gave Argentina 4. They came to Spain and became unstuck. They could not do anything to Spain. They could not get close. They tried to pressure Spain. Spain would just pass their way through trouble. Triangles. You had Sergio Busquets, Xabi Alonso in midfield protecting the defense. You had Iniesta and Xavi controlling the momentum, controlling the chances of the game. You had David Villa, lethal as ever, as he has ever been. You had a young Pedro with energy and pace. You had almost everything. You had, for me, in my opinion, 2 top 10 players all time, Iniesta and Xavi, at the absolute peak of their powers. And I think also maybe what put Spain in the number 1 position was because they had players like that. And around the time, that was when Barcelona were also dominating. And so for me, it's like you have to have Spain as number 1 because what you could say what Spain did translated to Barcelona, what Barcelona did translated to Spain, and it was just a beautiful marriage. You know what I'm talking about. The Euro 2012 tournament, 4 wins, 2 draws, 0 losses, 12 goals, 1 conceded. Whew. How are they not top, right? Torres was their top scorer. Iniesta was the tournament MVP, so he was the best Spanish player. You could say Andres Iniesta, especially now he's retired. Talking about him, he is the greatest Spanish player of all time, and they've had really amazing players. But for me, Spain are the greatest team that I've ever seen play. They could have been second because that 1970 Brazil team was just that good. But I have to have Spain at number 1 because of the things that they've won, right? They won 3 tournaments in a row. I'd never seen anything like that before. Of course, we had seen, teams win 2 tournaments back to back, like the 72 to 74 West Germany team, 98 to 2000 French team, Brazil 2002 to 2004. We saw Brazil 58 to 62 win 2 World Cups in a row, but 3 tournaments in a row, back to back to back, that's hard to do. That's hard to do, and that's why they are number 1. Also because of the players they produced. They had like if you had to take out some of the players in the starting 11 and put in other players, they still would win a tournament or two. They'd still do really, really well because you had players on the bench like Santi Cazorla, Cesc Fabregas, all-time great midfielders, David Silva, he had Juan Mata, and in other positions, in the DM position, um, what's his name again? Oh, I forgot. I forgot there was a player that I was thinking of, but I forgot his name again. But that's what I'm talking about, with Spain. And for me, they're the greatest national team of all time, simply because they combine all the categories that I spoke of, and they maximized more than any of the other teams that I spoke of. Trophies, the players, the style of play, the dominance, the dynasty that they had. So they combined it better than anyone did. And they were that good. They were that awesome, all time great. And there you go. The greatest 10 of the greatest national teams of all time because of the national break, because of the international break. So I hope you appreciate the video. Done a lot of work on it, but thank you very much. So tell me what you think. Remember, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, comment down below. What do you think? Is there a team that I left out? Italy 2006, maybe. Argentina 1986 with Maradona and the Hand of God, maybe. So many other teams that could have made it. Tell me, where did I go wrong? What do you think is the team that you would want to have in this list? But yeah, remember, like, subscribe, share at We Talk Football 24 on Instagram and YouTube, at We Talk Football on Facebook. Until next time, have a nice week. Awareness.